Welcome to another of our Geography on the Box GCSE study videos. This one's going to be looking at how you answer a question if it focuses on changing land use, and the case study we're going to be looking at today is the Greenwich Millennium Village. We'll have a look to start with at where it's located, we'll look at how the land use has changed, how sustainable those changes have been, and how those changes have affected different groups of people. Now, before we go any further, just a quick word about how to use this revision GCSE video. If you are just listening to this video, then that's great on one level, but it's probably going to have limited impact on your revision. What we do want you to do is to use this video. Use it to create a mind map, to use it to write out your case study notes, use it to answer an exam question, we'll talk about that later, or even create a cartoon showing sort of before and after. But if you want to get maximum use out of this, please don't just listen to it, use it to do something active. Active revision is key. But let's get back to the case study now. Now, the reason we need to study this case study is so we can answer a question that talks about land use and how that land use has changed. Now, what you can see here is a typical type of exam question. In fact, you may well have seen it in your mocks. As with any 8-mark question, you'll start by asking where it's located. You'll then get a describe question. In this case, it's how has the land use changed? Then you'll have an explain question. The mock exam question asked you to explain how sustainable the changes were. The only other question I can think of which they could ask at this point is how these changes affected different groups of people. What we need to do now is go through each of these in turn and make sure you have got the understanding, the notes, to be able to answer that question with real confidence. Now, the first thing we need to do is be able to locate it. As you will see from the map, it's located in this region here. This is east of London. It's south of the River Thames and is in the north of Greenwich Borough. Now, before we actually look at the redevelopment itself, we have to understand what the original land use was. The key thing here is that this was Europe's largest gasworks before that shut down and became a derelict site. And in fact, you can see from the picture that that derelict site was not an attractive environment at all. In fact, it was one of the most heavily polluted bits of land in London, if not the southeast of England, and had lots of sort of heavy metal pollutions, arsenics, lead, very nasty stuff like that, which meant that the area was largely uninhabitable. And in fact, before any redevelopment could be taken place, they had to do a huge amount of cleaning up and what's technically known as scrubbing, where they try and clean the soil. Now, once we understand what the land use was, the next thing we have to explain to the examiner is how this land use has changed. If you look at the map, you'll see it's radically different from that old industrial wasteland. So that brownfield site has been turned into a very vibrant mixed land use area. The total area is 76 hectares in size, of which 20 hectares is made up of eco-parks. You'll see these in the north of the map here, and these are areas of wetlands, shrublands, fantastic environments for a wide range of species, be it birds, insects, urban foxes, and that's great. That means that's developing the sort of biodiversity of the area. It's also somewhere really good for kids to play, adults to go for a walk and reduce stress, and that may be something we come back to later. The whole area, not just the Greenwich Village, is going to be home to 10,000 new houses and flats. They've created 150 new shops and restaurants, they've redeveloped the underground station here, they've built a primary school and a health centre. So basically what you have here is everything you need. Somewhere to work, somewhere to go to school, or somewhere to go and eat, somewhere to go and buy stuff. That's what we mean by mixed land use. And you need to have a couple of those examples to be able to explain to the examiner what we mean by it. Now, as we said earlier when we looked at the exam question, a typical question examiners might ask is, so how sustainable is this change in land use? If that's the case, then you need to understand what has actually changed and why that's good in terms of sustainability, or even bad. So let's just go for a few of them. Now, I appreciate there's a lot of text here, so you may want to stop the video and have a read. And actually, if you are thinking about other activities, trying to draw little cartoons or sketches are probably the way to actually try and remember these. But let's go through them one at a time. Perhaps the most noticeable feature about this is these large eco-parks. Remember, about 20 hectares of them. Because of those parks, what you have now is a safe habitat for animals, for plants, just for wildlife in general. And that's going to increase the number of species, and we call that biodiversity. So you have here your first sort of key sustainable plank, that massive increase in the number of animals and plants, biodiversity. Secondly, we talked about this development creating thousands of jobs. Now that's great because these are hopefully long-term secure jobs. That's going to be reducing unemployment in the area, and if you reduce unemployment, you're going to be reducing poverty. And because these are not temporary jobs, that improvement hopefully is going to be long-term and therefore sustainable. Perhaps the easiest one to explain is the buildings themselves. If you look at the houses, what you'll see is that they were designed to be eco-friendly, and they've got a huge number of features to actually make them energy efficient. In fact, the architects claim that they use 80% less energy than a normal house. Now this is due to a number of reasons. First of all, they use what's called a combined heat and power system. This means that the heat used in the houses for the central heating is actually created from a power generating system which is burning materials, and the excess warm water from that then gets pumped into the houses, and that's fantastic for reducing the amount of energy. So you're not using separate energy to heat your water up and for your electricity. Modern insulation, triple glazed windows for example, cavity walls, really high quality, means that heat will not escape, again saving your bills. The windows cleverly designed, large, big windows, lets lots of sunlight in so you don't need to have the lights on, also lets the sun's heat in as well. They're triple glazed so the heat can't then escape, and they face south. And the reason they've chosen south, that's facing the sun to maximise the use of that natural sunlight. All of this is sustainable because it means you're using less fossil fuels. These are non-renewable resources, so are going to run out. So what you're doing by reducing that is you're creating long-term gains. You could also at this point talk about climate change and greenhouse gases as well. But a key idea of sustainability is about not using things up which can't be replaced. So this is a good example of that. We've already talked about mixed land use. Jobs, homes, schools, etc., all in one place. That means that people are going to stay in the local area. If they stay in the local area, they're going to get to know their neighbours. Hopefully that's going to create a friendly environment. Friendly environment doesn't sound that important, but actually it's going to be a cause of less stress, more happiness, better qualities of life. And because these are all permanent features, they're going to be long-term and sustainable. Again, we can also have a look at the way it's been designed to avoid the use of cars. Cycle paths, walkways, the underground station, all means less cars. And if you've got less cars, less use of fossil fuels, less traffic, less air pollution, better environment for everyone around. All of that means it's a sustainable development. Now, you may actually get asked about how this affects different groups of people. If you do, then it's important that you can talk about 3 different groups. And in fact, many of the facts we've already talked about can be used to explain why they will either like or dislike this development. Let's have a start with families. If you think about families, you've got a local school. That means it's easy to take the children there. That's got to be good for the parents. There's parks to play in, which are safe and local. Again, if you've got young children, it'd be fantastic. And also, we've already talked about the fact that lots of cycleways, few cars, that means there's less chance of accidents with cars, so parents and children are going to be safer. Now, an interesting group to consider are unemployed locals. Probably the most important thing here is that 24,000 jobs have been created, and this is really positive. But there is a bit of geography here. If you look at the type of jobs that's been created, they're mainly 2 types. First of all, you've got the sort of offices and sort of big businesses that have moved into the area. Now these are going to provide mainly highly skilled, highly paid jobs. And in fact, many of the traditional local population in the East End of London won't have the skills necessary to apply for those jobs. So it'll be people moving into the area that get the jobs. The other type of job created will be perhaps security, cleaning, or working in the restaurants. Now, these jobs generally require less skills, but are often much lower paid. So in fact, really it's only high-skilled, high-paid jobs and relatively low-skilled, low-paid jobs that are being created here. Now, many of the people living in the East End of London will actually have, in the past, perhaps worked in manufacturing type industries, small scale industries, and may have very different skill sets. So there is a question about if these jobs are actually appropriate for the locals, or are they actually providing jobs for relatively wealthy people to come in from outside the area. The other issue is the housing themselves. Because there are relatively large pockets of poverty in the east side of London, one of the problems here is, will local people actually be able to access these houses? Because they're so attractive with their big sort of sustainable features and new sort of trendy area that it is, it may well be that many locals simply can't afford to live here, and that there's a danger that it's become a sort of wealthy area which is excluding some of the original locals from this part of the world. Now, a final group you can always talk about are environmentalists. These have been really pleased with this if you think about it. They've built eco-parks, that's great for biodiversity. We're seeing energy efficient houses, so we're seeing reduction in fossil fuel consumption. We're seeing people being encouraged to use public transport and to walk. And in fact, if we go right back, remember this is one of the most polluted derelict sites in London. And what we've seen here is a wonderful example of brownfield redevelopment, which involved that sort of scrubbing of the heavy metals from the soil and the cleaning up of the environment. So they're going to be really for it. Now, having considered all of that, what I suggest you do is you pause the video in a second, have a go at one of these questions. You will have to do question 1 and 2, whichever, and then take your pick on whether you want to have a go at question 3A or 3B. Remember that when you are writing this, you should give yourself around about 10 or 11 minutes to do this. And make sure that you've got all the key information that you need to include. That information must include one piece of place-specific information. This is a piece of information that can only be true for your locality. An obvious example of this is that it was Europe's largest gasworks and that the soil was heavily polluted with heavy metals. Another example would be as if you can quote exactly the number of jobs or exactly the number of houses. But you do need one piece of place-specific information. You must make sure you've got a balanced answer, both describes and explains. So you want to spend about half your time, maybe just a little bit less, describing the change in land use, saying what was there before and what has been built there now. And then finally, you need to explain. And when you're explaining, make sure that you have got 3 separate points. And in fact, a good piece of advice for this section may be to do 3 small mini paragraphs, 1 for each. If you're talking about sustainability, then maybe you might want to talk about job creation for the first paragraph and how that increases local wealth and reduces poverty. For the second paragraph, you might want to talk about the actual houses, how they're designed to actually reduce the consumption of fossil fuels. And for the third one, you might want to talk about the biodiversity in the eco-parks, or even possibly how they've tried to reduce the need to use cars. But if you split them up in separate paragraphs, you're literally shouting to the examiner that, look, here are my 3 points. Okay, examiner can't go wrong then, has to give you the marks. So, have a go at the exam question, see how you get on. Feel free to give it to your geography teacher, and any problems, come back to us. Well, that's it for now. I hope this has been useful, but with all our videos, we'd really appreciate your feedback. Either what's wrong with this and how we can improve it, or if you have any other ideas, how we can help you with your revision. So, cheerio and goodbye for now.